You aren't a victim of your circumstances. You are a volunteer for your own misery. Hear that again. Slower this time. Every day you wake up and choose this. The complaints, the excuses, the righteous anger at a world that owes you nothing. You've been coddling your ego, waiting for life to become fair while your potential rots in the waiting room of someday. You seek comfort, but comfort is the anesthetic that lets your life be amputated without you feeling a thing. You don't feel it happening. That's the point. By the end of these 8 laws, you will have killed the version of yourself that complains. You will walk away with a predator's focus and a stone-cold immunity to external chaos. No more negotiations with weakness. No more bargaining with your own standards. Most of you will breeze through the first 3 laws. You'll nod along, feel momentarily inspired, maybe even take a screenshot. But Law 7, the executioner's mercy, is the exact reason your discipline collapses every Sunday night. It's the reason you reset every Monday morning like a broken machine. If you skip that section, you've wasted your time here. Turn this off now or commit to the end. Your choice. Law 1. The sovereignty of dirt. You blame the rain for your harvest failing, but you never bothered to plant the seeds. You sit in the wreckage of your own inaction and point fingers at the economy, your parents, your genetics, your circumstances, as if any of that matters, as if the world stops turning because you didn't get dealt the hand you wanted. Here's the truth they don't teach you. The rain doesn't care about your crops. The market doesn't care about your business idea. Your boss doesn't care about your potential. And that girl you're too scared to talk to? She doesn't care about your internal monologue. The world is indifferent, not hostile. Indifferent. And that's the most liberating thing you'll ever hear. The Stoics called it the Dichotomy of Control. There are things within your power, your thoughts, your actions, your decisions. And there are things outside your power, everything else. The weather, the traffic, what people think of you, how the algorithm treats your content, whether your father ever says he's proud of you. If it isn't your choice, it isn't your problem. But you've been living in reverse. You obsess over the things you can't control and neglect the only territory you actually govern, your discipline, your focus, your standards. All right, you abandoned your kingdom to go beg at someone else's gate. Stop it. Every complaint you make is a confession that you've handed your power to someone who doesn't even know your name. You want respect, but you gave away your sovereignty for the price of validation. You want success, but you're waiting for permission that will never come. The rain will fall. The obstacles will appear. The world will remain unfair. And you will still have a choice. Plant the seeds or keep complaining about the soil. Here's your execution. Right now, today. Pick one thing in your life you've been blaming on external circumstances. One thing. Maybe it's your physique. Maybe it's your bank account. Maybe it's the relationship that fell apart. Now strip away every excuse. Remove the story you've been telling yourself about why it isn't your fault. What's left? The action you refused to take. The conversation you avoided. The discipline you didn't build. That's your dirt. That's your sovereignty. Stop asking for a lighter load. Start building a stronger back. You don't need the world to change. You need to become the kind of person who doesn't break when it doesn't. You need to become unmovable, not because you're stubborn, but because you finally realize that your power was never in controlling the storm. It was in controlling yourself. Most people won't do this. They'll read these words, feel something stir, and then return to their excuses by tomorrow morning. They'll blame the rain again. But you already knew that, because until now, you were one of them. Law 2. The Silent Fortress. You leak power every time you vent your frustrations to someone who doesn't care. Think about it. How many hours have you spent explaining your problems to people who nodded along and then forgot about you the moment you left the room? How many times have you announced your goals to friends who smiled and silently hoped you'd fail? You thought you were processing. You thought you were being vulnerable. You thought talking about it would make it lighter. It didn't. It made you weaker. Every word you speak about your struggles to the wrong audience is a withdrawal from your internal bank. You're spending energy that should be directed at solving the problem on people who can't and won't help you solve it. You're trading action for sympathy, and sympathy is the currency of the powerless. The Stoics understood this. They built what Marcus Aurelius called the inner citadel, a fortress inside your mind that no external force can penetrate. No insult can breach its walls. No rejection can scale its heights. No chaos can burn its foundations. But you can't build a fortress while the gates are wide open. Silence is not weakness. Silence is the highest form of dominance over your environment. The man who doesn't need to explain himself is the man who has already won. The man who doesn't react is the man who cannot be controlled. You react to everything. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and you're ruined for an hour. A comment online, and you're drafting paragraphs in your defense. A slight from a coworker, and you're venting to anyone who will listen. You've made yourself a puppet. And the world is pulling your strings for entertainment. Here's what you don't understand. Your enemies don't need weapons when you give them your attention. They don't need to defeat you when you defeat yourself by reacting. Every time you respond, you're announcing that they have power over you. Stop announcing it. Retreat into the inner citadel. Let them scream at the walls. Let them beat on the gates. Let them throw everything they have at you. And when they're exhausted, when they've spent all their ammunition, you'll still be standing, unmoved, unshaken, silent. Here's your execution. For the next 7 days, practice strategic silence. When someone insults you, say nothing. When someone tries to bait you into an argument, say nothing. When you feel the urge to vent about your day, your boss, your circumstances, say nothing. Not because you're afraid, because you're in control. Instead, take that energy and redirect it. Write down the problem. Break it into actionable steps. Execute on one of those steps immediately. Stop talking to people who can't help you. Stop seeking validation from people who don't respect you. Stop leaking your power into conversations that go nowhere. Build your fortress in silence. And when you finally speak, make sure it's not a complaint. Make sure it's not a defense. Make sure it's a declaration of what you've already done, because the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest, and you're done being weak. Law 3. The death of fair. You think you're owed a reward for doing what you're supposed to do. You showed up on time and expect applause. You stayed faithful and expect gratitude. You worked hard and expect recognition, as if the universe is keeping score, as if there's some cosmic accountant tallying your efforts and preparing your compensation. There isn't. The world doesn't care that you did your best. Your best might not be good enough. Your effort might not matter. Your sacrifice might go unnoticed, and the person who cheated, who lied, who cut corners, they might win anyway. That's not injustice, that's reality. You've been operating under a delusion, the delusion that fairness exists, that good things happen to good people, that hard work guarantees results, that playing by the rules means the game will reward you. It won't. The Stoics had a phrase for this: amor fati, love of fate, not acceptance, not tolerance, love. You don't just endure what happens to you, you embrace it. Emma, you look at the obstacle in your path, and you don't ask why it's there. You ask what it's building you into. The fire isn't punishment. The fire is the forge. Marcus Aurelius wrote this while leading an empire that was collapsing. Epictetus wrote this while living as a slave with a broken leg. Seneca wrote this while being ordered to kill himself by a tyrant emperor. None of them complained about fairness. None of them waited for the world to become just. They became unbreakable instead. But you're still keeping score, still comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20, still bitter that the cheater got ahead while you stayed honest, still angry that your loyalty wasn't rewarded, still waiting for the universe to acknowledge your pain. It won't. And every second you spend waiting is a second you're not building. Here's what you need to understand. The obstacle isn't in the way, it is the way. That rejection taught you resilience. That betrayal taught you discernment. That failure taught you what doesn't work. You wanted an easy path, but easy paths build soft men, and soft men don't survive what's coming. The blacksmith doesn't apologize to the steel for the heat. The heat is necessary. Without it, the blade stays dull, breakable, worthless. You are the steel. Here's your execution. Write down the one thing in your life that feels the most unfair right now. The thing you resent. The thing that makes you bitter. The thing you keep replaying in your mind, trying to rewrite the ending. Now reframe it, not as something that happened to you, but as something that happened for you. What did it teach you? What weakness did it expose? What strength did it force you to build? Stop mourning fairness. It was never real. Stop expecting the world to reward you for existing. Existence isn't an achievement. Amor fati. Love your fate. Not because it's pleasant, but because it's yours. And the only way forward is through. The obstacle is the way. And you've been standing still long enough. You've accepted the world won't reward you, but there's something deeper. You're still a slave to the things you think protect you. Law 4. The voluntary grave. You are terrified of losing things you don't even own. That car you're still paying off, that relationship that's already dead, but you're too afraid to bury, that reputation you're clinging to in a room full of people who will forget your name in a week, that comfort you've built around yourself like a cage. None of it belongs to you. You came into this world with nothing. You'll leave with nothing. And everything in between, borrowed, temporary, on loan from a universe that doesn't ask permission before taking it back, but you live like it's permanent. You make decisions based on protecting things that are already slipping through your fingers. You stay in jobs you hate because you're afraid of losing security that doesn't exist. You stay in relationships that drain you because you're afraid of being alone with the person you've become. You're not protecting anything. You're just dying slower. The Stoics practice something called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. They would sit in silence and imagine losing everything, their wealth, their status, their loved ones, their health, not to be morbid, to be free. Because once you voluntarily walked through the graveyard of your own life, nothing can threaten you anymore. Seneca took it further. He practiced voluntary poverty. Once a month he would eat nothing but bread and water, sleep on the floor, dress in rags, not because he had to, because he wanted to prove to himself that he could survive it, that if the empire collapsed, if his wealth vanished, if Caesar turned on him, he would still be standing. And when Caesar did turn on him, when the order came to end his own life, Seneca didn't beg, didn't bargain, didn't break, because he had already practiced his own death 1,000 times. But you haven't practiced anything. You've insulated yourself, wrapped yourself in comfort, and convinced yourself it's safety. And you've made yourself dependent on things that can be taken away in a single moment, a market crash, a phone call, a diagnosis, a message that starts with, "We need to talk." And when it happens, not if, when, you'll shatter, unless you prepare now. Here's your execution. Pick one comfort you rely on, not something you need, something you've made yourself dependent on. Maybe it's eating out every day. Maybe it's your morning coffee ritual. Maybe it's scrolling before bed. Maybe it's the validation you get from posting online. Remove it. For 1 week, not forever. Just long enough to prove to yourself that you don't need it, that you're not a slave to it, that if it disappeared tomorrow, you would adapt and survive, then go deeper, spend one night sleeping on the floor, eat plain rice and beans for a day. Sit in a cold room without turning on the heat, not as punishment, as training, because the man who can survive on nothing cannot be threatened by the loss of anything. You're carrying weight you don't need to carry, and it's making you weak. The voluntary grave isn't about suffering, it's about freedom. It's about walking into the worst case scenario and realizing you'd be fine. And once you know that, no one can ever control you again. You've learned you can survive with nothing. But you're still carrying weight that isn't physical, the chains of other people's judgment. Law 5. The mirror of malice. You care more about the opinion of people you don't even like than you do about your own self-respect. Read that again. Someone who wouldn't cross the street to help you has more influence over your decisions than you do. And someone who doesn't know your story gets to write your ending. Someone who criticized you once, 3 years ago, still has real estate in your mind, paying no rent, controlling your actions. You gave them the keys. Every time you change your behavior because of what they might think, you're announcing that their judgment matters more than your integrity. Every time you hold back because someone might laugh, you're confessing that their comfort is worth more than your potential. You've made strangers into gods, and gods into tyrants. Here's what you don't understand. An insult only has power if you agree with it. If someone calls you weak and you know you're strong, it doesn't land. It bounces off. It dies in the air between you. But if someone calls you weak and part of you believes it, that's not their fault. That's yours. Oh, they didn't wound you. They exposed a wound you were already carrying. Epictetus was a slave, born into chains, beaten, crippled, and yet when his master insulted him, when the empire dismissed him, when the free men mocked him, he remained unmoved. Not because he was numb, because he had internalized a single truth. No one can humiliate you without your permission. Your humiliation requires your participation, but you participate constantly. Someone criticizes your work and you spiral for days. Someone unfollows you and you question everything. Someone doesn't text back and you create entire narratives about your inadequacy. You've outsourced your self-worth, and the people you outsourced it to don't even care enough to manage it properly. Here's the truth. The people criticizing you are usually the ones doing nothing. The ones mocking your effort are the ones making none. The ones judging your path are the ones too afraid to walk their own, and you're letting them set your direction. Here's your execution. For the next 30 days, track every time you change a decision based on what someone else might think. Not will think. Might think. Every time you don't post something because of potential judgment. Every time you don't speak up in a meeting because someone might disagree. Every time you don't pursue something because someone might laugh. Write it down. At the end of 30 days, read the list. Count the opportunities you murdered. Count the moments you chose their hypothetical comfort over your actual growth. Then burn it and make a new decision. From this point forward, you answer to one person. You. Not the version of you that seeks approval. The version that has standards. The version that would rather fail loudly than succeed quietly while bowing to people who don't matter. The mirror reflects what you show it. Stop showing it a coward. Someone else's opinion of you is their problem. Your opinion of yourself? That's the only one that builds or destroys you. Stop handing the hammer to people who want to watch you break. You've stopped letting strangers control you. But there's an enemy closer than any critic, your own inability to sit still. Law 6. The tyranny of now. You are a slave to your dopamine receptors and your 3-second attention span. Your phone buzzes and you check it. A notification appears and you click it. You feel bored and you scroll. You feel hungry and you eat. You feel tired and you quit. You've reduced yourself to a biological reaction machine with no override function. You don't make decisions. You respond to stimuli, and the world has learned exactly how to exploit that. Every app on your phone is engineered by teams of psychologists whose only job is to hijack your attention. Every algorithm is designed to keep you clicking. Every notification is timed to interrupt your focus. They've studied your weaknesses. They've mapped your triggers. They've turned you into livestock. And you keep volunteering for the slaughter. Here's the truth. You can't build anything meaningful with a mind that's fragmented into 1,000 pieces. You can't develop discipline when you can't sit still for 5 minutes. You can't achieve mastery when you're constantly switching tasks like a rat in a maze looking for the next pellet. You're not living, you're buffering. The Stoics called this ascesis, the art of voluntary discomfort, the practice of saying no to a legitimate desire just to prove you are the master of your body, not its servant. Not because the desire is wrong, because your inability to control it makes you weak. Seneca would practice going without food when he had food, going without sleep when he could sleep, sitting in discomfort when comfort was available, not as punishment, as training. Because he understood something you've forgotten. The man who cannot delay gratification cannot achieve anything worth having. Every great thing requires patience, depth, focus, time. But you've been conditioned for instant messages, instant entertainment, instant validation, instant results. And when something requires more than instant, you quit. No, you start the workout program and abandon it in week 2. You start the business and give up after the first setback. You start learning the skill and switch to something easier when it gets hard. Not because you're not capable, because you've trained yourself to expect immediate reward. You've become a dog, salivating at bells you didn't even choose to hear. Here's your execution. Pick one impulse you obey without question, something you do automatically. Maybe it's checking your phone first thing in the morning. Maybe it's snacking when you're not hungry. Maybe it's quitting your task the moment it becomes uncomfortable. For the next 7 days, delay it by 1 hour. Not eliminate it. Delay it. When the urge comes, acknowledge it, feel it, and then say no. Not forever, just for 60 minutes. Then watch what happens. Watch how the craving peaks and then fades. Watch how the urgency was manufactured. Watch how you survive without it. That's you reclaiming territory. That's you taking back land that was occupied by forces you didn't even know were controlling you. The stopwatch is running. Every second you spend as a slave to now is a second stolen from the future you claim you want. And that future, it requires a version of you that can sit in the fire without flinching. Start building that version today. Or stay a slave forever. Law 7. The executioner's mercy. This is where most of you quit. Not because this law is complicated, because it requires something you've spent years avoiding, holding yourself to a standard you can't negotiate with. You forgive yourself too easily for being mediocre. You call it self-care. You call it balance. You call it being realistic. But what you're really doing is making peace with a version of yourself that doesn't deserve peace yet. You missed the workout and told yourself you needed rest. You scrolled for 2 hours and called it decompression. You chose comfort over commitment and framed it as self-compassion. You become fluent in the language of justified failure, and every time you let yourself off the hook, you're training yourself that your word means nothing. Here's the truth. You are a saint to others and a coward to yourself. You show up for other people. You meet their deadlines. You keep their secrets. You honor their time. But when it comes to the promises you made to yourself, the standards you set, the person you said you'd become, you grant yourself mercy you didn't earn. Arse, this is the exact reason your discipline collapses every Sunday night. This is why you reset every Monday morning like a broken machine. Not because you lack knowledge, not because you don't know what to do, because when the moment comes to execute, you negotiate, you feel tired, and you change the plan. You feel uncomfortable, and you lower the bar. You feel resistance, and you call it intuition, telling you to stop. It's not intuition, it's weakness wearing a mask. The Stoics understood radical accountability. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the world, and every night he would sit alone and interrogate himself. Not gently, not with compassion, with the brutality of a prosecutor cross-examining a criminal. Did you waste time today? Did you speak carelessly? Did you let your standards slip? Did you act below the version of yourself you claim to be building? He gave himself no mercy, because he knew that mercy granted too early is just permission to fail again. Here's what you need to understand. The world will give you enough excuses, enough justifications, enough reasons to quit. You don't need to manufacture more on your own. Be ruthless with yourself. not cruel. Ruthless. There's a difference. Cruelty breaks you down without purpose. Ruthlessness cuts away everything that isn't strong enough to survive what's coming. Here's your execution. Tonight, before you sleep, write down 3 promises you made to yourself that you broke this week. Not promises to others. Promises to you. Don't justify them. Don't explain them. Don't soften them with context. Just write them down and read them out loud. And then decide, are you someone whose word means something, or are you someone who negotiates with themselves until nothing remains? Tomorrow morning, pick one of those 3 promises and keep it, no matter what you feel, no matter what comes up, no matter how much your body resists, keep it. Because the man who keeps his word to himself becomes unbreakable, and the man who doesn't becomes a liar living in a prison of his own construction. This is the law that separates pretenders from predators. Most of you will fail it by tomorrow. Prove me wrong. Law. 8. The memento mori mandate. This is the final boss. Most people use death as a reason to give up. The 1% use it as a reason to never stop. You act as if you will live forever. You waste hours on things that won't matter in 10 minutes. You postpone the important for the comfortable. You delay the conversation, the project, the risk, the change, because you tell yourself there's always tomorrow. There isn't. Every second you spend reading this, you are dying. Not metaphorically, literally. Cells are breaking down. Time is evaporating. The distance between you and your grave is shrinking with every breath. You aren't living your life. You're dying it, 1 second at a time. And every moment spent in victimhood is a moment you've murdered. The Stoics kept skulls on their desks, not to be morbid, to be awake, memento mori. Remember that you will die, not someday, today. This could be your last hour. This could be your last conversation. This could be the last time you have the chance to become who you were meant to be, and you're spending it scrolling. So Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." He wasn't being dramatic. He was being honest. He knew that every emperor before him had died, every warrior, every philosopher, every person who ever thought they had more time. They didn't. Neither do you. But you live like you're immortal. You hoard your energy for a future that isn't promised. You save your best effort for when things get serious. You wait for the perfect moment to start living at your potential. The perfect moment was 10 years ago. The second best moment is now. Here's what death teaches you. Nothing you're afraid of matters. That rejection you're avoiding, you'll be dead in 60 years and no one will remember it happened. That failure you're hiding from? Dust. That embarrassment you're trying to prevent? Forgotten. The only thing that matters is whether you spent your limited time becoming someone worth remembering, or whether you spent it protecting a version of yourself that was already dead. You have been given a finite number of heartbeats, an hourglass that's already half empty, and you're wasting them on comfort, on safety, on the illusion that you have time to waste. You don't. Here's your execution. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Sit in complete silence. No phone, no distractions, no escape. And imagine this. You have 1 year left to live, 12 months, 365 days. What changes? What stops mattering? What becomes urgent? What conversations happen? What gets built? What gets abandoned? Write it down. Now look at what you wrote. That's your real life. That's what actually matters. Everything else is noise. Everything else is you pretending you have forever. You don't have forever. You have now. This moment, this breath, this decision. Stop negotiating with death. It's undefeated. It doesn't care about your plans or your potential or your excuses. The only question that matters is this. When it comes for you, will you have lived, or will you have just existed, waiting for a permission slip that was never coming? The grave doesn't care. But you should, because the ghost you've been living as needs to die today. So the person you were meant to become can finally take their first breath. You made it to the end. Most didn't. They tapped out at Law 3 when fairness died. They quit at Law 7 when the mirror showed them what they really are, but you're still here. That means one of two things. Either you're ready to stop being the person you've been, or you're just consuming content, waiting to feel inspired enough to change without actually changing. Inspiration is a drug. It wears off. It always does. What doesn't wear off is a decision, a line drawn in the sand that you refuse to cross back over, a commitment made not to the algorithm, not to me, not to anyone watching, but to yourself in the silence when no one's keeping score. So here's the test. If you are finished making excuses, if you are done negotiating with the weakest version of yourself, if you are ready to enter hard mode and stay there, comment the phrase, "The ghost is dead." 3 words. That's it. Not because I need to see it, because you need to say it out loud in writing. As a public declaration that the person you were yesterday no longer exists. Words have weight when you put them into the world. They create accountability. They draw a line. And once that line is drawn, you either honor it or you prove you were never serious to begin with. But don't comment if you're not ready. Don't type those words if tomorrow you're going back to the same patterns, the same excuses, the same comfortable grave you've been digging for years. This isn't a game. This isn't motivation. This is a contract with the only person whose opinion of you will matter when you're lying on your deathbed counting regrets. Now here's what happens next. Close this app right now. Don't watch another video. Don't scroll. Don't check your notifications. Put your phone in another room. Sit in silence for 10 minutes. Not with music, not with a podcast, silence. And decide which part of your current life needs to be burned away today, not next week, not when you feel ready. Today. Because everything you've heard in the last however many minutes means absolutely nothing if you walk away unchanged. Information without execution is just entertainment, and you've been entertained long enough. The 8 laws are in front of you now. You know what needs to be done. You know which law you've been violating. You know which version of yourself has been holding you hostage, so kill it. The ghost is dead, or it isn't. And the only person who will ever know the truth is you.